not usually an in-the-moment kind of crier. I cry later watching a funny advertisement on TV or sitting in a strange place and suddenly it overtakes me. But I was overtaken twice in the graduation of our daughter Madeline from medical school on Friday. But not, of course, yes, yay, it was exciting. I wish you could have been there because our small little family did not quite make the noise you were clearly supposed to make when she walked across the stage. But my tears did not come in the expected moments, like when she walked across the stage or got her hood. It was rather when all that was over and the class speaker, a fellow graduate from medical school, got up to speak. And her speech was wonderful and called her fellow graduates not only to heal and to be present as a healer for their patients and to take care of themselves, but to heal the systems in the world that brought patients to their door. It was a wonderful speech. And at the very end, she thanked, as they all did, the friends and family who had supported these graduates in their work and in their study. And then she stopped and in Spanish thanked her own family, telling us that her father had said, "How much of this will be in Spanish?" And the answer was nothing but that. It was a beautiful and poignant moment. Though I am no scripture expert, disagree a little bit with the writer of the letter to John, our second reading. He starts off by saying that everyone who knows and loves Christ is born of God. But everything I've ever heard and learned as I try to follow Jesus Christ is that is reversed. What I have come to know through Jesus Christ is that everyone is born of God. And it is in our discovery and walk with Christ that we learn that and begin to practice acknowledging that I have been born of God, and you have been born of God, and we have all been born of God. It is Jesus who taught me to love God. It is my family and friends and strangers who have taught me to love God. That's why it's so important, I think, that second reading ends and he repeats it, that Jesus is born of water and blood. And not just water, he says, but water and blood. Why? Water, as we will be reminded again today as we baptize 2 new Christians, water is a symbol of that inclusion into the Christian community. But Jesus wasn't just born of baptism, a religious ritual, and for him in the Jewish faith, but blood, the blood and water that rushes out when a person is born of their mother. Jesus is fully human. This is so important for the writer to remind us, is that we are born of God because we are human and born of water and blood. And how do we know this? The Spirit of truth. As we live as flesh and blood and bone in the world, it is the Spirit that teaches us. This is, I think, especially important when I'm talking with parents preparing their child for baptism. Often it's a little infant, and so it's easy to say that this child has hardly not even sinned at all, and that all that language of sin and washing into new life is more appropriate for an adult. Now, Christopher's a little older than a baby, so I'm sure he's he said no to his parents in a way that was serious. And though Mavis is perfectly perfect in every way, I'm sure she's had more experience than Christopher in the ways of the world. What we are reminded at baptism is that Christopher is born of God. Mavis is born of God. And that ritual and the words we say and the promises and all the actions are to remind us that we, the community, their parents and godparents and us, the community, are shields against the world's way of trying to strip away that knowledge that we are loved by God and that we are born of God. Baptism reveals something we already know to be true and reminds us that we have to work to keep making it true. That we are born of God, and everyone is born of God. And how do we live that in the world? Around baptism, there's lots of explanation of what it means to be a child of God. Words and words and words. And our readings today were all about one word. What was it?
Love.
Yes, over and over again. In fact, this preacher was like, what do I say? It's so simple. It's all about love. How do you make that complicated? Oh. Yeah, we're human. We make it complicated. And we've been seeing it. It's complicated in raising children. It's complicated as we look at our world today when we see young people standing up for what they believe in, and administrators trying to respond, and police called in, and parents, and we are reminded that they are all born of God. And that our response to each of those people we see on the news and our next door neighbors is love. Not just an idea of love, but that flesh and blood love that is so difficult. Except that we are reminded by Scripture that it is simple. That everyone has been born of God, and all of us are loved by God. And we make all these human actions and rituals and words just to remind ourselves over and over again what we already know is true, and what Christopher and Mavis are reminding us today. We are all born of God, and God is love. And our actions and our way in the world, as hard it is when we look in the face of violence and hatred, is still love and the power of love.